category of winners and losers from Trump 2.0, Ukraine decidedly falls into the latter category. The Biden administration says it will rush the last $6 billion earmarked to Ukraine before the inauguration. The lame duck president can give Ukraine $4.3 billion worth of Pentagon weapons that are ready to go, and has $2.1 billion on hand to put in more orders for weapons with US defense contractors.
It often takes months for American weapons to make it to Ukraine's front lines, and Trump might be able to halt the shipments before they get to the battlefield, as that could be the last aid the nation sees from the U.S. for a while. President-elect Donald Trump has not hidden his disdain for how this war is being conducted, or his respect, perhaps, for the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Joining us now to weigh in is host of the Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. Great to have you back.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So do you expect we might actually see a change in foreign policy with respect to Ukraine? This is something that many Republican voters and some Republican politicians have talked about. J.D. Vance has talked about, the vice president-elect, charting a different course, playing some role in persuading Ukraine and Russia to make peace, even if that comes with Ukraine having to do some concessions. And Donald Trump has, I think, gestured at that idea as well, and obviously has a warmer relationship with Vladimir Putin, or a relationship that many in the mainstream media have criticized. What do you actually expect to see from the new administration on this particular front?
Well, I mean, first of all, you have to look at Trump directly campaigned on that he would, quote, end the war in a day. So obviously that's a hyperbole. Nothing could be done in a day, but his claims were repeated when he met with Zelensky in September, in the latter days of the campaign, where he said, standing right next to Zelensky, that he wanted to have a negotiated settlement. He wants this thing to be done. He wants to get Zelensky and Putin together and have a conversation. And there's no reason to think there's anything different today. I actually was on the phone earlier this morning with the senior Trump advisor on foreign policy, and they confirmed to me that is still very much his position. I was told that, quote, that Trump believes that, quote, war is a stalemate, and he said it cannot be won by military means. He said it doesn't matter how much weapons and ammunition the United States give, the war is simply unwinnable. A view that I absolutely echo and have been saying on your network for a couple of years, that it's just not winnable. So I think that Trump recognizes that and acknowledges the simple truth. And so it would be foolish, if not actually harmful to the Ukrainian people, to say we're just going to blithely go on and just keep doing what the previous administration has done, because that will harm Ukraine ultimately. And this is something that I don't hear enough of in the Western media. If you look at this from a military perspective, it's not a stalemate. And the Washington Post and the U.S. Intelligence community have recently admitted this. Russia is succeeding on the battlefield. And if things continue on in the way that they've been going, Russia will eventually win a military victory. And that would be far, far worse for Ukrainian outcome, and definitely for American and Western Europe if that event came to it. So it makes a lot of sense to try to get this thing negotiated in the best terms possible as fast as possible.
But if President-elect Trump is sending the signal that he will, at the very least, reduce aid to Ukraine, and if, in your account, Vladimir Putin and the Russians are succeeding or have the upper hand on the battlefield, doesn't that actually, withdrawing or reducing aid, actually embolden Putin further to continue with the invasion with the hope of winning a total or near total victory?
Now, if you listen to what the Russians have been saying and are still saying, and what they're doing on the battlefield, they don't care who won the American presidential election. They're going through with the assumption that they're not going to get a negotiated settlement because they claim they don't trust the West. Agreements have been reached in the past and met, so they are moving forward to settle this issue on the battlefield. If Trump can provide a viable diplomatic alternative that can help them get their objective, which is security on their border, without having to continue to lose all of the men that they would have to win militarily, then it's they have an incentive and a motivation to have a negotiated settlement. But listen, here's the hard part is that it's not at all clear that the current lines of contact are where an negotiation would be. Putin has indicated that he wants more than where he is now. So I'm not even saying that if Trump goes in and does this, that the conflict will be frozen on its current lines and that will be negotiated. Putin may say, no, I want more than that, even in a negotiation. And then Trump and the West and everybody else is going to have to decide, are they willing to settle for less than they have now, or do they ignore that and then have the risk that Russia conquers more territory? So this is going to be a very
right, conquers more and then says, now in the negotiation, we want even more, right?
Well, I mean, that is the truth. And the harsh reality that we have been unwilling to come to grips with is that they have the upper hand militarily and can do that no matter what we want to happen. The only way that that could change is if we directly engaged with U.S. troops or NATO troops. And of course, that would be the most catastrophic outcome, because now then you have the prospect, if not probability, of escalating into nuclear war. We just don't have any good plays here. That's the reality.
So one of the themes that emerged during the campaign was the level of disrespect that some current and former military minds have for Donald Trump. Obviously, during his previous term, there was when he ran, he talked a very different kind of foreign policy. And in some ways, the foreign policy was different, but in some ways, there is just continuity in the subject because there's a bunch of experts and military officials who remain in charge regardless of the partisan shape of the administration. Now that that's all kind of in the open, the level of disrespect some of them have for Trump, is he going to be able to I don't know, keep his eye on the prize and actually chart a different foreign policy with so many of the same people still behind the scenes in charge?
Well, I mean, we certainly have to hope so. I mean, he has been elected by the American people as the commander-in-chief. So it is incumbent upon him, and frankly, one of his shortcomings in his first administration, that he did not take that role seriously enough internally. And that means that you've got to find folks that are willing to do their constitutional job and to obey the orders of the President of the United States. That's actually in our oath of office as officers. And if people aren't willing to do that, and if they're trying to subvert it, then I'll bluntly stated, they need to be replaced. Because we're supposed to have our oath to the Constitution, not to anybody, man or woman, who's elected to the office. And I think that is a dangerous situation and an unhealthy one if you have members of the military or people in government that are trying to subvert or not do what the president wants. If you don't agree with it, you have every right to withdraw and to resign from your position. And I think that that's the honorable thing to do if you don't think that you can put their vision into place. But I assure you, there are quite a number of military experts who very much agree with Trump's positions on foreign policy and would be happy to step into those roles should these others want to vacate them.
And just briefly, you say that there are a lot of those people there, but what is your level of confidence that it is the people who will follow through on the preferred Trump policy who will get those jobs versus people who would want to block those policies?
I think that because Trump had such a problem with that in the first administration and didn't figure it out until literally the last maybe even a third of a year of his term, I know for sure because I've talked to some of the folks on his transition team, and they're very painfully aware of that, and they're doing very good work as much as they can to try to identify people who do want to, who do share the president's vision and want to go into these positions. But I think it kind of implied in your comment there is that there are a great many people in the government and in the military, and you can't go through and just call all them out in the next 60 days or so. So you're going to have to do the best you can to govern with what you have. But all of that with the caveat that he remains, or will be rather, the commander-in-chief, and it is required. Any commander of even a military unit has to say, hey, if you're not willing to obey the orders that I give, then you got to go somewhere else. And it remains to be seen whether Trump will push back and do that or not. But if he doesn't, I think he's going to have a harder time seeing his vision brought to reality.
I promise we'll let you go after this, but do you have thoughts on the Israel situation that really did end up hurting Kamala Harris, I think, during this campaign in places like Michigan, her proximity to Joe Biden's position. Trump has been not as clear on this subject as I think he was on Ukraine. If it's going to be a similar level, I mean, he's full-throatedly supported Netanyahu and Israel in the past, but he got Muslim Arab American votes from people who want the violence there to end. I think it remains to be seen exactly what's going to happen or if it's going to be any different from the current administration, but there really is a hunger among some of the voters Trump got this time to pull back, wind down, or at least not be actively aiding the violence in Gaza.
Right. Yeah, I think that's one of the bigger results from this, because you saw it during the primary season, where a lot of these voters, especially in Michigan and Minnesota, gave their protest vote, so to speak. But it wasn't listened to. They didn't listen to it enough, and then it turned into a real issue, especially in like Dearborn. That's shocking results, I think. And the issue now is that Trump doesn't have to worry about an election, so he didn't have to worry about, frankly, making anyone happy or not. He's just got to do what he thinks is the best. But I think that you can see that there in Trump's, I guess, his DNA, or what he's been really from the beginning all the way through his last administration and now, is that he is fundamentally against escalation into war. He does not want to go into a war, especially one that can't be won, and he has correctly recognized the Ukraine war can't be won. And I hope that he's, and the people he puts in place, recognize that the war that Israel has gotten itself on, this 7-front war by their own accounting, can't be militarily won. And so I doubt that he's going to come in and just say, all right, whatever you say, Netanyahu, just here's a bunch more bombs and stuff, because that won't help the Israeli state. They won't be able to succeed with that. And so I suspect, but I don't have any confidence, because I haven't heard from anybody on the campaign right now about what he plans specifically to do with that. But that's just what he's done in the past.
Doing that would not be good for Israel's security or for U.S. security, frankly. So I hope we listen to some points of restraint on multiple subjects. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, thank you so much for joining us today.
Always my pleasure. Thank you.